Hello. Um, I haven't announced this, so I'm hoping people will get a notification that I've gone live and come join me. So I'll just witter along to myself for a little bit. My plan, oh, it is Monday. It is the 2nd of December. Can't believe it. The year is nearly over. 2024. Just 30 days. 30 days? 29 days left. 29 and a bit if you count today. And it's been an interesting time where I live. We've had last weekend, there was really heavy rain. The um, town centre, the shopping streets were flooded, as was a residential street again. But even though there was quite bad flooding in the town, not so many houses were affected elsewhere, I think. Some businesses were along the river that runs down. I'm fine. I'm safe. Everything's fine here. I live on a hill. And for water to run off the hill and get to my house, it has to go through many streets of other houses. So, I'm okay. I had to go out last Sunday evening, and that was a bit hairy scary in some ways because the weather was awful. And yeah, I had to go. I could cancel. I had a lovely time, but it was an interesting drive, shall we say, as was yesterday because I had to go somewhere yesterday evening. And again, when I left, there wasn't any rain here in my town, but as I went west, the rain would lash down, and you got the spray on the motorways from big lorries and so on. On the way home, there's been a couple of accidents, one that blocked one of the off slips from the motorway. Um, but I take my time, I drive safely, and I had a lovely time listening to Rivers of London by Ben Aranovich. I have read nearly all of the books in the Rivers of London series. I think I've got a couple I haven't read or listened to. But the audiobooks are great because I get the humour a lot better when I hear somebody talking. And I usually listen to music while I'm driving, but I decided to put an audiobook on and I thoroughly enjoyed that experience. And it didn't distract me from the road and my driving at all. But I did have a few chuckles along the way. And I'm looking forward to finishing listening to it, even though I know the story. I don't mind rereading books and re-listening to things and watching films again that I've enjoyed because you never pick everything up. Well, I don't pick everything up in the first watch, second watch, third watch, or read. It can take me many neat reads, and it can take a long time until pennies drop that I actually get the funnies and I go, "Oh, that's what it meant then." Because I can be really slow on the uptake at times. My brain works very literally at times and doesn't always catch sarcasm or certain kinds of humor, and sometimes puns will um will leave me by. And a number of times I've had to have something explained to me, or somebody said, "Angela, I was just joking. I wasn't serious. I was just being a bit snarky." I went, "Oh, right." So I've had a lovely time. So anyway, I'm going to start having a look at this, and I know that as people join, they may come back, or stay, or I can go back and flip through. So before I start looking at this, I've been away for a couple of weeks again. I developed tonsillitis, and that laid me low. Combined with the low from COVID, I've had a bit of a rough time. And I'm still extremely tired a lot of the time, and brain fog settles in very quickly if I've been, focusing on what I'm doing. Like this will tire me today because I'm focusing on talking and doing art and thinking about what I'm going to say. It's a lot for my brain, but it'll cope and I'll be fine. And I know I can have a big mug of tea when I've finished. So I thought I'd have a look with you at what I've been doing. I've got a couple of sketchbooks. And I've got these things, some of which are finished, some of which aren't. And I know this is where I left off the last time we looked in this sketchbook. Hello, who's ever joined me. It's lovely to have you here. And this is art that is inspired by Rebecca Blair, but there's some touches of Zentangle in here. And I find this kind of way of working with sections and strips and focusing on patterns is one way I really love to work. And it doesn't really work for me if I start combining it with motifs and more flowful art. It does in some instances, it depends how organic it is. Sometimes I quite enjoy having it depends how I'm constructing things. Anyway, I've been looking at things. So this is where I was when I finished. It's got some copper on the page, metallic copper, which I like, different from gold. Copper's my favourite metal, I think. Um, these then are all just examples of patterns I could use. I was working on this last week. I haven't dated it. I forgot to date it, but it's there. I've left it as it is because I'll fill bits in as I go along. But I've been watching a YouTube channel called Agate's Dad. Hello, Anne. It's afternoon here. It's actually 3:30 in the afternoon, but it's lovely to see you. Welcome. Um, I've been and looking at agate geodes and that took me on a trip down my one of the things I love, minerals and the patterns you find in minerals and rocks. So these are taken from agates and similar kinds of rock. Um, Malachite is another one that I love, anything like that. So, and of course, patterns like this, variations, there's similar things in Zentangle. Rebecca Blair uses similar, other people do, and playing with sort of like optical art there. What I wanted to show you, can I find it? I think it was back in this book. Yeah. Way back, I sat down and drew with a pencil and went over it with a pen, I think. I did, I can see the pencil lines. Where I just basically just scribbled almost on the page, just let my hand create things. And then afterwards, I picked out shapes and so on and added texture to make this interesting. And this was another one where I had no idea what I was drawing. Um, I had nothing in my mind. I just let the pencil work and my hand to make happy shapes and happy movements, things that I enjoyed. Well, I watched a video. What's the name? I will look the name of the channel up. I've forgotten completely. I'm gonna have to make some notes of this, aren't I? Wait a moment. Let me turn a piece of paper over. Just write it on the back of one of these. So, sorry, I can't speak and write. I can. I used to have to as a teacher and lost the knack. And this person drifted upon it because YouTube does strange things. It's sort of like um shows you things and then you realise, "Oh, right, actually, it's the other sketchbook I need to be in first." I'll come back to that one in a moment, and this one. It's a bit higgledy-piggledy here. And I liked what they'd done, where they said, "This is a great way to break creativity," and using something called automatic drawing and, just seeing what happens, letting your pencil dance across the paper, making movements without any conception of what it is. It might look a mess, but you just go with it. And it's very freeing, and it's a very interesting kind of thing to do. So I know I've done it in the past, but I haven't done it for a long time, and perhaps all my artwork is like this, but it tends to be I don't use the pencil first. That's the difference. In this way, I'm not consciously thinking of shapes that I like. I'm just letting things appear, and sometimes the lines are jagged, sometimes they're more boxy, but everything I do is sort of like curvy and yeah, it's my style, I think. So this, you can't see it because I've erased the pencil. It was all a pencil mess. Well, it looked a mess, but it wasn't. Where I picked out shapes and so on, and I've started adding texture. And I thought, yeah, okay, we've done that. Got that one sorted. And then this was one. I actually did this yesterday morning. I was on a Zoom meeting, and sometimes when I'm on a Zoom meeting, so I can concentrate on what's being said, I'll draw because I can filter out lots of voices or various things going on a lot easier, and I can focus on what somebody's saying. I'm not very good at looking at faces and listening, being able to hear people. But I drew this with a fountain pen and dimwit here didn't leave it long enough before I erased the lines, but it's okay. But this started with a pencil shape. And what's interesting, just like with this one, I've got open space. I find it so hard to leave open space. But this way I do. And with this one, I had in mind because I've been looking at things to do with art composition. and how you compose a diagram, what kinds of basic layouts you can use and things like that, which is fascinating. And this basically is an L shape, which is quite a common one, and it's quite easy to do. Mine spreads out to the edges, but the main part here is about a third of the way in and a third of the way down. And that again applies to something called the rule of thirds, which I will try to explain. Well, it's what it says. You basically split your drawing area into three in both directions, and then you get four intersections, which is where they mark out a third up and a third down. And you make one of those kind of like a focal point, and it always seems to produce a pleasing composition. It's sort of like it's where our eyes are automatically led to. So with this one, I knew that, so I wanted to put a big shape there, and then everything else, it's all wibbly and wobbly, but it's wibbly and wobbly in different ways to how I do it if I was drawing. There's lots of little lumps. I say lumps and bumps, but little dips and hills on all of these. So that was good fun. Yeah, there's lots of writing because I reflect on things. This was the next one I did, and I've added watercolor pencil because I thought, I wonder what this would look like if I add color to it. So I kept it simple. I used a turquoise color and sort of like a mossy green color just for contrast because I wanted these things that looked like beads or gems or seeds of some kind to stand out a little bit. And I haven't paid much attention to the rules of shading and other things, but I just wanted to use color to help to bring a bit more structure to it. I didn't feel like adding textural patterns or anything else. I just wanted pure color and let that do the work. And I actually really enjoyed doing this, both drawing, using the pencil to sketch it without any thought. I think I was listening to something. So my mind wasn't on the art, I was just letting it go. And maybe what I was listening to influenced how shapes were put together. In some places they look a little bit disjointed, but it all works. And then this morning, was it this morning? Yeah, it was this morning because I'd finished the inking, or I had a little bit of inking in to do, and then I decided I'd do the colour, and I'm really quite happy with this. I really like that. Then I went back to looking at all of these rules of composition, and one suggestion, I'm going to pop it this way, is to, can you see two C shapes? Two letter Cs that sort of like, I don't know, nest into one another, but without joining. So I made use of this, and it's almost like we've got a something swirling around. And yay, the structures are similar because I'm drawing them. But I absolutely enjoyed doing this. I haven't added any colour yet. I'm not quite sure because part of me wants to add colour to the white space or the empty space, and then perhaps using some textures or perhaps just some simple shading to this to give these some life. I don't know. There's no rush for me to do that as a sketchbook. So these aren't meant to be finished pieces of art, but there's certainly things I can refer to. This is dragging my attention here, this bit. It's not something I would ordinarily draw like that. And the way that these sort of like go off in different directions, it's all to do with how the pencil lines and the complexity of those is how my eyes focused on certain things and pick things out. Even if you're not trying to think about it, you're going to go for things that you like and are familiar. But I would never, ever, unless I'd looked at this stuff, have gone for shapes like this. What I'm gonna have to do, I think, is set up a Pinterest board so I can share things with you like this if you use Pinterest. Because a lot of my boards I yeah, I I don't share. I keep them for myself because I drop things in there and when I'm done with them I get rid of them generally. Apart from a few that I love. And can be a bit of a collector and hoarder of things that are eye candy for me and give me ideas so that I can look through them when I'm looking for ideas. But if you'd like that, just let me know. Okay, leave a comment either in the chat box here or in the comments for the video because I'm quite happy to do things like that. Um, I haven't added any colours, I've said to this yet. I'm not decided what I'm going to do, but that is my last of these autumn, and we're gonna do one of these later. So get your pencil, get your pen, get a piece of paper and a straight edge ruler of some kind so you can draw a frame. I like these to spill out of a frame or to have a frame round them. I don't know why, I just do. It just pleases me. When they spill out, it makes it interesting. I don't have disconnected things coming out underneath the frame because that would look wrong to me. That would be jarring. But I do like something like that. Okie doke. So that's those two. Okay, you did see this. More work of Rebecca Blair. I thought I'd try things that were sort of mark shaped. And with these, I drew out the grids. Would you believe it? The size of these boxes, the way I put grid lines on was exactly the same in each one. So we've got squares, it's divided into two, and then squares going across, you can see that. And I did use diagonal lines on all of them. These, I just have the one like this and repeated it all the way down. I haven't finished actually. I can see that I haven't finished putting these details in to fill that in. Forgot about that. Um, And I did this as a kind of experiment. I used alcohol markers. So this is Ohuhu marker paper, which is actually okay. I will do, Anne. All right. I will create several, no doubt, with different themes, and I'll private the ones that I'll put secret ones for myself, but things specifically for you, I suppose. I will do that because it's a really nice way to share ideas, and I can drop some of my art in there if you'd like as well. That's not a problem because it's nice to share inspiration and ideas. And it's nice to share things that inspire me, I suppose. So you get an idea of what I like and what I see and the information that I'm still learning about. I never had formal art education. I did an A level in school. That is in the UK. Most people do A level art between the ages of 16 to 18. And it's the qualifications that you need to go to university to do a degree. And the level of learning is a bit different in the UK to America, I gather, because I think that a bachelor's degree in America is is a little bit higher than an than A levels. It's more like A levels than it is anything else, and a PhD is more like our degree over here. They're not quite equivalent, and a PhD is in the UK is considered higher than perhaps a PhD would be in America in some ways, and so it's all a bit. Our education systems are different. Well, I did my A level when I was teaching in a secondary school, and I did it with a sixth form, the 16 to 18-year-olds who were taking A-level art. 'Cause the head of art at the time was a good friend, and she encouraged me to take part in an after-school class for staff as a way to use art to rest and relax and to de-stress and have some quiet time. And I was then gently maneuvered into doing my AS, and AS is what you do before you take your A-level. Um, so what the 1-year course, and then the A-level makes it 2 years. So I did, and I ended up doing my A level, and the sixth form couldn't believe they had teachers doing the work with them because there were 3 of us who did an AS, 3 or 4, and then 2 of us went on to do A level. And they would speak to us with ideas, want to see what we were doing for inspiration, and we were looking at them as well and making suggestions. And because I had all nice art materials, because that's me, I'd share them. My iridescent inks at the time, acrylic inks were big hit with some of them, and it was just fantastic. But that's the only formal art education I've had, apart from when I was in school up to 13 years old when I had to choose my O levels, which you do before you do your A levels. So I was 13, 14 at the time. And I was told no way would I be allowed to do art, that I was dreadful at it. And I didn't have any intention of doing it, but that stuck with me, that message, throughout my life. But in some ways, I'm glad because it might be a longer journey for me perhaps in some ways, but I'm free to explore what I want to and to do things the way I want to, rather than be, restricted by what other people are teaching you and showing you. So the rules of composition and the oh, what do they call it? The things that make up art, the techniques, not techniques, but the different art elements are things that I didn't really know about. I still don't really. I do sort of, but I've looked at them along the way and I keep dipping back into them. Anywho, so let's get on to that. Oh, I was talking about this. So these have got very definite structure to them. And I love geometric patterns. I love creating them. I love the play that you can create. These are all very different, these are different, yet they all start off with the same basic shape for each square, which is a square with a cross through it. Except these ones, I ignored one cross. The alcohol markers I wish I'd chosen, these colours are all there's no, how can I say? There's not enough difference in saturation of colours for them to stand out. And then adding black on top has really brought some of them to be so similar. But I always say I'm not very good at colours, but I found it fun to do, very autumnal colours. This is another variation on the same theme. So instead of having squares, I actually created rectangles, and that created I used diamonds. Um, in this way, I did draw the crosses and the rectangles and so on, and but I came up with diamonds. You might be able to see if I move this that you might be able to see some lines underneath this black. That's because I did fill these in with pattern, but it didn't do anything for it. And I wanted these sections to show up and not the ones that I'd filled in. So I went in with black. I will add some gold to that though. And there's probably gold triangles in there. I used watercolor paints. No, I used Faber-Castell watercolor markers. Don't know what they call them that, but I use them in this, red brown, I think it's red, Indian red, and this yellow, which I think is yellow ochre light, and I mixed them together, so I got, slightly different colors here and there and mixes of them, and what I really wanted to do was to have pattern on top so you could see the checkerboard pattern of the yellow and red underneath, but I just went too much there, in my opinion. Okay. This is basically what I would have started with in all of these cases, just about. A grid, which I measured or actually did it a slightly different way. Um, I might show you. I'm not very good at explaining, but I haven't done anything with this one. This was one that I did, and I realized I didn't like this. So I thought, okay, then let's try some different things. Do I like them? I like these, but I feel there needs to be a bit more contrast in them. But I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that. And this one, they're very similar, but I like the triangles in the corner. And these were very heavy-handed in the center, but you know, it's all learning. This is a grid that's ready to go as well. And this one I have added colour, and you can see that sort of like yellow ochre and the Indian red. And in places they've mixed. In some places I've missed the line, but that's fine. This one, oh, it reminds me so much of a diaper pattern. And it's amazing, isn't it, how we can be judged by other people's standards or what they expect. And you realise that art is very personal. We create art, we should create art that pleases us in some way, that speaks of ourselves, what about us. It's it's an expression of our personality, our experience in life, what grabs our attention, what things we like, emotions, memories, whatever it may be, but it's very personal. And which is illustration's a bit different, isn't it? It's about telling a story, often goes with a book or with something else. It's the same. It can be very personal, but it can also be somebody else's idea of what's wanted. Um, but everybody still has their own personal way of doing things. I can see I just made no sense then with the difference between illustration and art. I think with illustration you work to a brief. I guess you can with fine art, but a lot of the time it's a very personal thing. And this reflects my inspiration. What I've loved has always been nature. Fossils, minerals. I love architecture, particularly medieval, Anglo-Saxon medieval, early medieval architecture, but anything. Later on, I love William Blake's work, and I love the arts and crafts and the precursor to the arts and crafts, William Burgess in particular. And, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, these kinds of things. And I do love, the sort of like the 1960s pop art, that you see, the hippy jippy trippy stuff and the posters that came out then with all the wonderful hand lettering. Medieval manuscripts is something I love. And a lot of that came out in my A level and AS work. I was really lucky that, you had art teachers that were very perhaps a change from when I was in school and were very encouraging of people and wanted everybody to understand that no matter what people have told you, you are an artist. It's just finding your way of expressing yourself, what works for you. And I did teach some art, even though I was a science teacher. I taught some art for a couple of years, both while I was doing my A levels and after, particularly with children with special needs. And they were amazed that they left after the first lesson. My first year 7 class, so they would have been 11-year-olds just coming into secondary school. My first art class was to them. And none of them believed they'd be able to do art at the beginning of the lesson. And after the end of the lesson, every hand went up and said, "Yeah, I think I can do art. I think I can do this." Because we'd looked at different kinds of art that weren't photographic. So we'd looked at some cubist, we'd looked at oh gosh, I can't remember now, like Kandinsky, love Kandinsky, and things like, all kinds of things like that. And people with Modigliani, isn't it? The people with very long, thin necks and the head on one side, and then another artist who doesn't use the colours of the feds and the fours, who used colours that went with emotions rather than what you actually see. And by the end of the lesson, they had a little exercise to do, and they all believed they'd be able to draw. And they, even the person I've been told was the naughtiest boy that had come up to the school from primary school, was an absolute darling and came up to me at the end of the lesson and said, "Miss, I want you to know I really believe I can do and I can be good at art, and I think I'm going to be good at science with you as well," which was absolutely darling of him. And the class was absolutely fantastic. But it's awful how teachers can have such a big effect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm sure, you know, depending on behaviour and things, there may have been things that were said that people took to heart. I certainly did when things were said cruelly to me from pupils. But it stays with us until we find that either that opportunity or somebody who's willing to lead us into discovering these things. Every human is creative. It's part of humanity. It can be drawing, it can be painting, it can be knitting and crochet, it could be cooking, baking cakes and decorating them, gardening, woodwork, metalwork, building architecture, home design. It can be anything. Jewelry design, making jewelry. So many arts and crafts and so many people take part, but they don't think they're artistic or creative, but they are. And it's just finding that you are able to do that. So I'm so glad that you're hooked on learning and creating art, because I think it's one of these things that we need to express because it is who we are as humans. Oh, thank you, Anne. Um, I did have a unique outlook, and I certainly was a unique teacher in school. I didn't really fit in, especially when they now try to make teachers clones and teach in exactly the same way and the same, every lesson has to be structured in the same way, even though I couldn't do that, especially with special needs, because every class is so different. You can't do one size fits all. And I left anyway before I fell completely foul of that. Um, I had to for my sanity. So diaper patterns are the repeating patterns that you find in medieval manuscripts behind illuminated letters and in illuminations, the drawings that decorate, the medieval books and Bibles and so on. It comes from a French word, diaper, which was used for a kind of a style of weaving that created a fabric that had a raised pattern on it that were used as towels and absorbent fabric. Diaper, which is where babies' nappies are called diapers, often now. Okay, one more, a couple more before I draw. So this was another one again. I started at the bottom and realised I'm not sure about. I don't know how the black bars ended there. I think I just messed so much up. But I've put these little things on to make them look like they're sort of like you'd have them in stained glass windows. So it's a bit like panels of stained glass window from a window, and these little decorative bits that held those or decorated the ends of the big bars that between each section of the window. That's my thinking. And I decided to try to add patterns that would get more and more open to let more and more of that red colour show through, almost like the most light is coming in through the top of the window and the bottom's in a bit more shadow, perhaps. And the last one, I thought I'd try something else. I've been looking at Rebecca Blair's work and the way she does hills and mountains, and I thought I'd have a go at a landscape. Not sure about that, but it is what it is. So I use greens and a brown here and just blues at the top. And these I used Faber-Castell, the Albrecht Dürer watercolor pencils. Don't ask me what colors. I know these were sort of like olive greens or mossy greens, and this was more of a green. I wanted to get bluer and less saturated, kind of, as I went further away. Hopefully, they look further away, and these look closer, and these look. I don't know whether I've got that right. So, with no further ado, let's sure. Let me come back. Get your sketchbook or or a piece of paper. I'm going to use my A5. This is from Sakura. Art expressions. Taylor. I can't remember the name of it. Dutch company. It'll come to me. They do something very similar with the same kind of paper, and it's not white. It's off white, but I'm quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do. T-square rulers are really useful because you don't have to measure. As long as you can put this edge up against the edge of the paper, you can actually draw a parallel line. Takes a bit of finagling on a book, but you can do it. I do it all the time. So I'm drawing one that is a fair bit in. Now, if I end up wanting to make this smaller, I did that with the double C one that you saw. Then I'll just draw another little bit in. So that's my basic thing. And I'm going to use, I don't want to do the double C again, but what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go up about a third and in about a third. It's about here. I'm just going to put a circle there. And then I'm going to draw a line. Perhaps goes like this. So instead of going from corner to corner, we're going across. It's not perfectly straight, but it's just a guideline for me. I don't need to make any more use of it than that. I am going to leave hints of that circle there. Hope you can see that. See if I can get some more light shining on this. We've got a bit of a shadow at the top, but I think we're okay. So you want to know what pencil I'm using. It's a black wing. I discovered these. I love them. I also love my mechanical pencils. Whatever pencil you've got will do. And yes, we are using pencil because this will be erased because we're going to ink in. Now, the secret to this is not thinking about what you're doing, not judging what comes out the end of your pencil, not worrying about the shapes or if lines aren't what you want. You're just going to draw. Let lines overlap, let scribbles almost come out because we can filter that at the next step. And I say this is automatic or intuitive or a mixture of them. It's very difficult to truly be automatic in your drawing, not thinking about it, because our conscious minds constantly thinking and wanting to judge and tell us what to do. So it might be useful to put some music on. Obviously, I can't do that because most probably YouTube wouldn't like me for it. Um, or something else where you can be listening to that and just letting your hand move with the music, which is quite this sort of Kandinsky was very intrigued by synesthesia, where people have almost crossovers of their senses. So people see music or they taste sounds or colours and where they pick up they have a special way of responding to things. And his art was often inspired by music in jazz clubs and things. And he tried to represent that music and the emotions and the feelings of the place, both in shapes and lines and colour and the rhythm of colour, because rhythm is one of those basic elements of art. So I'm just going to put my pencil down. Down here is where I want something rather large because I want that to be my place to start with. And I rather want this to, oh gosh, this is completely different. I wouldn't normally draw lines like this. I'm just letting it happen. My judging mind is saying, "Gosh, this is looking very flowery and, sort of like all sort of like that," but it won't be, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll get there. So I'm just putting lines down, and then I'm just going to let things flow as I feel they need to. The only thing I'm bearing in mind is I roughly want this to go this kind of way, and I think it may end up, yeah, my hand says it will, sort of like spilling out the corners here and over the edge, which is fine. Just coming back here and perhaps just putting some extra bits in and just seeing what happens and how this all works out. It looks a mess, but that's fine. But there's a shape to it as well, which is something that perhaps I wouldn't have drawn in any way, shape, or form. And I'm thinking, oh, I want threes there because, I like things in threes. Do I want to add any more? So the centre here, I'm just adding things like it looks like folded fabric, and I didn't really think of that. It's just what's coming out the pencil. It's how my hand's moving as I'm talking, because I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, which is a good reason why I'm just rabbiting on here. Really, I'm making this rather large there, and it does look very floral, but hopefully it won't end up floral. So I'm hoping that you can see that clearly. That's what I've done. That's it. How long did that take? Just a couple of minutes. Not overthinking it, not trying to create anything in particular. The only thought I wanted to keep in was keep this line here and have something around that bottom third. It's actually a bit bigger than that, but it's still towards there. And the idea of this composition line is that your eyes will follow it. So it gives you almost like a natural form to follow. So in the West, we tend to read from left to right. So we start at the bottom and work our way to the top right. That's how things happen. No doubt in other areas of the world where people read from right to left, they'd follow it down perhaps. But or you may just land on that big there and then explore the rest of the image in a different direction. I do want a piece of kitchen roll I've got here or a piece of paper because it will stop me A, smudging this and B, getting a mucky hand. And I'm going to start somewhere. And I do like to start around the focal point or, that big center, where there's going to be a lot of design there that holds the design down, I suppose. This is me talking out loud. And I've got an '05 pen. For the other ones, I used an '03, but I kept having to go around the lines a few times to thicken them, and I ended up wrecking pens very quickly. So I thought, right, let's start with an '05 and see where we go. So all I'm doing is I'm just looking at this and I'm looking for shapes that jump out at me. And there's one here that I think I might like. And it looks like a splat, and I'm happy with splats. And I've Made a bit of a mess of that line there, but it'll be fine. This is only a sketchbook, and naturally I'm already going around with thickening lines to the left and bottom to give some sense of dimension to this. There's a lot going on in here, and I'm looking for if there's any other shape I would like to bring out. That one fits, sort of. It may not be exactly the same as the pencil line, but it's inspired by. This is what I mean by intuitive, because I'm not going to use all of these lines. A lot of the pencil lines are superfluous. It's just a way of getting ideas down and perhaps breaking us out of our regular habits of how we create art. What we do is doing something completely different, and found it's also very great. The chap who I listened to said it's really good for breaking a creative block or getting over a creative block because you just sit and do this and it gets you creating. And you never know. I mean, some of the ones I've seen, this one, I'd love to scan this in and redraw it digitally and work on it on a bigger scale because A5, I'd like to do something like this. I've got interesting things going on here that I would never have used or created this on my own. And this looks almost like a little hand coming out, which was unexpected. I did not mean to create a hand at all. So I don't know why, just trying to hold everything together. I think you can keep everything in control. This here almost looks like it's disappearing underneath here and going somewhere else. So I could have put the rest of it sort of like appearing here and coming down, but I just didn't want to. I just thought, no, we'll leave it like that. Um, but I quite like lots of things that are there. So to go back to this one, let's carry on. I am adding inky glue here and there where lines join. I'm doing it now. Perhaps I shouldn't, because a smaller nibbed pen is better and neater and for doing things like that. But let's just see what shapes. I've got a shape here that is like this. This is an old '05 pen. The nib isn't very. It's got an odd feeling to it. Got another one here. Let's see if this one's any better. Possibly, possibly not. Oh, it's just as bad. It's time for them to be relegated to the bin soon. This is why I like different kinds of pens. I do enjoy Uniball Eye, actually. Get that out of my pencil case. Sure, I've got one in here. Yeah, there. These are fabulous. This is a micro one. You can get them in a medium and a large-ish size. The different colours. The biggest one's got a gold colour, and the normal sized one, I think the 0.7 is a light grey pen. But I like the micro. Just have to be careful. They do take a little while to dry, unlike the microns. But I think this is an '05 line. Don't think it says anything on there. But I'm just going to make sure I try not to do anything here. Yeah, it's a little bit of a finer line, but it's nice to draw with. I don't wreck these. So I think these will be my go-to pens in the future because I feel very guilty about using microns and uni pins, and I wreck them before they run out of ink. And you can't refill them, you can't replace the nibs. Whereas this one, they're really sturdy. They put up with my heavy-handedness. I'm looking for my next shape. I've got one here, I think. So again, these aren't shapes I'd put together in this kind of way. So it's taking me out of my comfort zone. I'm learning to trust the process, let the process work for me here. There is some thinking and judgment here because we're looking for shapes that pop out of this scribbled mess. But it's not really, it's just layers of lines and make use of them as we will. I could take some of these lines here and add some interesting details in this section. Actually, these dry quite quickly on this paper. I'm still going to be careful. There's a shape here that's quite interesting as well. So you're not thinking for shapes that make sense. You're just looking for ones that pop out that you can make use of. And we are drawing something that is everything's going to be connected. There'll be gaps, hopefully, big enough gaps here for some common sense. Now, there's a line there I think I want to make use of because that creates almost one of these seeds that I do like. It's like these are almost like that as well. So let's make them a little rounder and perhaps just pop another one there. There is a line there and there's a line here as well. So that will be a little bit more interesting. I can see here this line seems to go to nowhere, but I'm going to leave that there. But I can see there's an interesting line that comes off. I'm just going to join it to that to make this kind of shape. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be completed. I don't want single lines hanging off alone. I can see there's this shape at the end. So I'll add that. And there'll be something that does come. Ah, yeah, there's a shape here now. It's like this. It's not a pointy line or a thing. Oh, thank you, Amber. That's really kind of you to say. I hope you're having a go at this because this is fun. No pressure. Don't have to finish it. It's just expanding your creativity, is trusting yourself to be able to create something. You do it on a piece of paper or in a sketchbook that's just for sketching, but just for trying things out. All my sketchbooks are. Um, but it's lovely when people either get inspired or try things out. I'm suggesting because that's what I've said this before. I started my YouTube channel as a way for me to speak out loud what was going through my head because I don't think in words. I often am not aware of what my thoughts are when I'm doing things like this, which is why I'm not sure whether this is automatic or this is Angela-matic. But either way, it's a different way of working for me. And because I need to understand myself and what's going on, that it was natural being a teacher for 28 years. It's natural that I want to try to teach or to share what I've learnt and how I do things, but encourage you to find your own way through this as well, and to explore things and to have a go and to become confident and to understand that, you know, I create like this, you'll create your way. It doesn't mean your way's wrong or my way's right or vice versa. It just means that you might do something a bit different or something you've never thought of, or that you'll hear something I say that makes sense to you, or you might disagree with me and realize that what you've been doing is right for you because we're all different. And in art, we are, we're encouraged to be individual and unique. Never entirely are because we influence one another in many ways. And we're influenced by the past as well, by what we've seen. Anything we see and we take in influences our work, our feelings can do, what's going on in our lives, so many ways of using art to express things. Even art therapy, it's the same kinds of thing. And for me, I think, although it's kind of my business, though my business has to change because, adult coloring books and stuff, I've got to get some work done on that. But but I've not been able to. I've been unwell for 2 months with I had COVID, then tonsillitis, then oral thrush, and from the antibiotics I took for the tonsillitis, it's left me extremely tired, brain foggy. My brain gets tired very easily, and I know it's a long road to sorting things out. It's just made the perimenopause worse in some ways, in that way. But, everything just comes together as it needs to. I'm a great believer in that. We make the effort and things happen, I suppose. If we don't do anything, and the same with art, things change. This is completely a kind of different way for me to work to what I normally would do. Ah, that's interesting shape, and I'm going to make use of that. Look at that pointy bit. I've got a pointy bit. It's not it's not all wibbly wobbly curvy now. It's got a pointy bit on it. And that's because the script there's one here that's pointy as well. So I'm just going to put that one in and perhaps work on this now. Well, it's got a rounded end now, but I think it's going to be I'll do. No idea what that is growing off it, but it's fine. Well, that will work its way out in the wash. It may be that I finish this and decide, well, that looks a bit odd all on its own. So I'm going to add something to it or repeat it. Oh gosh, now I've created a black section there. This is why I prefer a finer pen to add shading and so on, but it is what it is, and you work with it. I'm just going to try and put a point on the end of this. It'll be black, but it's like a little heart-shaped leaf almost, but with a little it's got a little seed on its side. And you here it's just begging for something circular. It's that lovely little shape where you can nest a little seed or bead or pearl or whatever you want to call it in there. Okay. Something here is not quite as curvy, is it? It's got some sharp edges on this one. I'm still on camera, so I'm going to make use of those to add something that's a bit different, a contrast to the curviness that's in the middle here. I'm going to have lots of things that are quite spiky coming off the ends. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with all of this lot here. I'll come back to that and see whether I want to do anything with it. This is interesting because it's made up of lots of interesting shapes rather than. So it looks almost like we've got things like dry stone walls, just, or pebbles that have been washed up in a line, or boulders more like, because these aren't all nicely rounded. Some of them are quite jagged in shape, but it's just something that's very different. In fact, there's one here. So perhaps that is how these are going to fit together without a big gap. Perhaps that's how this lot will come together here. Yeah, I think so. There we go. So trust the process and just see what comes and how things work together. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But the chances are, I say the chances are very good, you're going to end up with something that's surprising, that you learn more about yourself and you learn more about trusting your intuition, trusting your own creativity and your own sense of making sense of what basically is random pattern. It's just randomness. Yeah. And that interests me as well, very much. This kind of idea of creating order out of disorder, I suppose, or chaos. Because life is chaotic, so perhaps this is a kind of metaphor for trying to sort life out as well. I don't know. I'm getting all philosophical now. Making something pretty out of disorder. Right. I am adjusting where the lines go. I'm not slavishly following the pencil lines. I'm just using them as a guide for what I want to put in to each of these sections. This one I'm going to leave, I think, open as it is and just leave that there. But I think I might just add a little something there so it just sort of like feels like it's just connected to this section. It's not floating around in midair. That's a big chunky one to have there, so I'll just connect it there. So that's where I am at the moment. Okay, I'll keep going up this side now. Again, we've got some interesting shapes here. So I'm just looking at these and how they sort of like just fall together, really. That was an unexpected twist there. So work that one out later on. If it stands out a bit weird, it almost feels like it needs something to connect it here. It says making a big mess with a lot of black ink. But let's have a look and see what happens. Perhaps I seem to find it interesting to start at the outside edge and work my way in, rather than starting from within the chaotic pencil lines and seeing what happens this way then. Is it now that's a very big section, and I may come back and add things to it, but let's try and get a lot of this sorted, I think. Okay, I'm going to start here. I've got a line that goes like this here. So I'm going to make use of that because it's quite different to the others. It's a lot less, it's still organic, but there's corners and twists, a lot more shape to it. And then this comes down like so, goes like here. So I'm going to make use of that and perhaps just follow these lines and see how they lead. Create something quite interesting. It's funny, as I'm doing this, I'm getting flashbacks to a dream I had. I think it was last night, the night before. I'm thinking, why? Makes no sense. It's not related in any kind of way, honestly. I guess I'm in the flow. The unconscious mind speaks. That's quite nice. There's a line here that I'm going to make use of, so we're using that there. There's also a shape that goes outside this, but I think I might truncate it and just pop it inside like that. So I'm making use of the shape of the line, even if it's not as long. So my aim is to try to delineate space, to try to separate things up in space. I don't want to overlap unless I have to here. I really do want to do something to this part. And I'm just going to use straightish lines. Got a bit of curve to them, and I'm adding ink around the edge. Don't know if I'll do any more on the other side. I'm going to remove the pencil lines before I do anything there. Carry on here. I've got this here, which I think would be great to use to connect this and this together, kind of as a support. And then I've got this here, which again, I can see is a there. Created that. I would never ever dream of creating a shape like that. Isn't that mad? I just chose lines and went with it, just followed it along and saw what happened. I didn't actually see that shape here, but it's got lots of interesting stuff going on at the base here. So I'm just going to add in these sections, I'm just going to add some little weird shapes. Then we've got shapes like this that layer behind them. So there are layers in this, even if you don't see it at first. It's just a matter of working with it and through it. And trusting that at the end, you'll have something that you're happy enough with, that's good enough, that's different to perhaps what you do, and perhaps you gain that little bit of confidence of trusting yourself, your own creativity, as I've said before. And it's really surprising what comes. I've got a shape here. I'm not going to connect that in that kind of way. Oh, how am I going to bring this one? Let's do that. I've got this funny little bit here, which I quite like. I'm going to have that sticking off the top. I've got a shape here that will come back around and connect there. I've got all of this to do on the bottom, but I have nearly far off finished. Don't think I'm going to go round and add all the inky glue and things. I may do, but I may just. There's shape there. And here's one that's really interesting, and I'm going to exaggerate it because it's quite different to everything else. And there's a little seed nugget there, a nugget of a seed. That's going to connect there, though. It's definitely leaf-like, like so. Let's have a look here. All kinds of interesting stuff going on there. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect those with that kind of U shape. There's a straight line there, but I thought, no, that gives a more interesting line. So I am using some judgment here. So I'm not just, you know, just copying the lines. I am thinking about, well, that'd be quite nice. Then got this. This is an interesting one there. So it's akin to this. It's just not as U-shaped. I've used the line that's there. This is an interesting shape. I can see. It's not something I'd have drawn if I hadn't done this. Perhaps I will now, because it may be that I spend some time going through these and picking out those shapes that I like and looking at them that way and perhaps adding them to my yellow pattern and motif and texture and goodness knows what directory. My yellow, um, it's not dot grid, it's a grid book. I think it's a grid, might be dot grid. But it's where I put things that I really like for reference, so I'm not having to look through artwork, that it's all in there. And of course, I can never put everything in there because it would take me so long. I'd be doing a piece of artwork again, basically. But with things I particularly like and perhaps feel I can make use of elsewhere, it is definitely something I like to do. There we are. We've got another shape that's quite square and sharpish. This down here is bugging me. I'm going to come back to that. My attention's drawn to it, so I shall go back to it. We're going to join these together. I've got this space down here. I've got to fill that in black. So I'm not worried if I add some black here and there because that black really does help to get rid of tiny little spaces that can be confusing. It's an interesting shape there. And there's one here that's got a sharp edge. We have a look. This one, I've got this goes down, but I'm going to make it go that way. And then I've got this one. We've got this little bit, and I want to go back over. I'm going to erase the lines out once the ink's completely dried. And then I'm going to have a look at some of these sections which are just annoying me here. This could be one of them where it just feel they may feel that they need something a little bit extra in that space. And it may just be that I need to go around with the inky glue just to make some of these places where the lines and shapes join just feel a little more cohesive or glued together, as it were. So I'm just echoing that shape there down, and I'm going to have a sort of like pointy kind of seed shape there. Here needs something, and I think it's just going to be like that. I'm going to go back over here because I feel I liked that quite a lot, so I'm going to add that kind of shape here as well. This is bonkers. And I mean that in the nicest possible way of the word bonkers. It's now just a question of going back and seeing if there's anything else I want to add to various places. So this is the place that is kind of vexing me and annoying me. And I just think I need to create some stonage here. I don't know if stonage is a word, but it is now. Things that look like little stones, just like the pile that leads up to this, and they've got smaller, so that makes some kind of sense there. That feels better. This feels a bit weird though. So I'm not quite sure how I can sort this one out. I think it may be using a shape like that and just, yeah, that'll work. Feels better. This one needs some volume to it, so I'm just going to add a curved line there. It just kind of echoes that line that is there, and I also fancy putting that shape inside it. Okay, some of these look a bit odd on their own. So this one, I'm just going to add that kind of shape again. I'll fill that little bit in with black. Here, it just feels that that needs to be separate from this area, and I am going to fill this area in with black ink. Oh, the other thing about Uniball eye pens is the ink is waterproof, or relatively waterproof once it's dry. So you can use watercolors with it, which is what I do or have done. But I tend to not use a lot of water and saturate the paper because this paper isn't really meant for watercolors. So it's going to be very kind of gentle or light washes of color. But ooh, that could have some black in there. This could be fun. You could that almost looks like a letter B. It's almost like you could hide letters or words in here if you wanted to. My brain isn't working on that at the moment. I just saw that and thought, ooh, random letters. How's that looking, do you think? It needs these little finishing touches really just to bring things together and to help make sense of everything and the layers and where shadows lie. And even though I've got pointy bits, I'm still adding ink to round those little sections because that is my style. That's what I like to do. I've done it for in all the time I've been ink drawing, I think. And that was long before Zentangle was heard of because it's a technique that it's been used by artists for a long, long time. And it just feels right to hold the lines together in some way and to connect them in a way that helps it make sense. Okay, we're getting there. The longest part is actually finding these shapes. So here, I've got this big section here, and I do want to cut it off, so I'm just going to put a little line there. And again, just adding some inky glue, bottom and left for shading, hopefully. to think about where the bottoms of each side are and the lefts, but you get used to it. I'm not creating real shadows, I'm giving the illusion of them. Now, my light source is always the top right, so the bottom and left will always be where the lines are darker and thicker. The land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. Sorry, Lord of the Rings, it does come up. But yeah. Not that the left and bottom is Mordor. Goodness forbid, no. Dark Lord here? No, never. I've gone quiet because I'm concentrating so I can get this done as quickly as I can. Because I know it can be very dull and tedious to watch every step, perhaps. Or maybe you're drawing along with me, which would be lovely if you are. Creating your own intuitive masterpiece, intuitive and automatic, an abstract drawing, something that can inspire and give you ideas for future artwork, or can just flex the muscles in your creative mind. As you work with the randomness of the scribbles in pencil or the lines in pencil you've put down and see what comes from it. It's very relaxing actually, and as I said, there's no pressure on you to create a finished thing or to create something that's completely polished. It's a good way of practicing things or trying things out. I part of me almost wants to use some textural patterns on this, but if I'm going to do that, it'll be after I've added colour because I don't want ink to run. So I just want to put the outlines in so that then I'll try and stay within the lines and we'll keep any ink runnage to a minimum. The other thing is that by erasing the pencil lines before I start to add colour, watercolour anyway, is that A, the pencil doesn't get trapped, but B, it removes any loose pigment on top of the paper. So you're less likely to have black ink running. Okay, I think I've been all the way round. I think that's mostly done. There's a little couple of places here that just need that shadow of ink. It's a name for a YouTube channel, isn't it? Shadow of ink. Sounds quite ominous. The inky shadows. Inky shadows. Yeah, the land of Mordor where the inky shadows lie. Yes, let us not go there. It is a scary place. I do talk rubbish at times. This is what's going through my head as I'm doing this rather than the art, which perhaps is a good sign that I'm not overly thinking this. As I'm doing it, I'm just completing what feels right, what I notice things need in various places. And it is really just polishing the lines and shapes as much as I feel I need to at this point. And it's a lot easier to do this now because I'm going to be using water on the paper. It changes the texture of the paper. And that means that it'll be more absorbent of the ink after I've added watercolour and the ink will feather. So if I do want to add ink texture lines in any way, I'm going to use a finer pen, a much finer pen to do that, just to keep that feathering to a pure minimum. But again, if it happens, it happens. And who knows, it might actually give an interesting effect to this particular piece of art. I don't know. Let's come back. Sorry, I headed off the screen a bit there. Actually finding that holding this on its side, I'm getting a much broader line. It's interesting. I have great trouble holding pens because my pen, I always try and hold pens completely upright. So holding them flat on the edge is interesting. I didn't know they did that. There we go. That will do, I think. This is an open space here, I've decided, this section here. So even though it looks a bit odd, it'll be fine. This, I haven't done any extra ink. I'm going to fill that little bit in there though. And here we just need that little bit. That's nice. Here that needs a bit of tidying. Does that perhaps? There we go. That's a bit of a messy one. Tidy that one now. There. Right, I just need to allow this to dry. What's that shape there? Must have been there. I drew it like that, so I'm just adding some ink to it. These, I think that needs to be rounder there. So we've got a crack into space. The space is shining through there. Change that shape just a little bit. And here where I've got. Sorry if my voice is going a bit quiet. I am muttering to myself as well. I'm trying to project. It's a bit better. So I'm just going to leave this to dry for a moment. Flex my fingers. Says, I'm going to leave it to dry, but as I look around, I can see, okay, I didn't do that bit, or I didn't do that bit. It's not the end of the world if I don't complete this, all. But I do like thickening these lines to give that feeling of, what over and under, I suppose, or what's on top, what's below. It all works nicely. Right, they've just about dried. I'm going to give them a bit longer. But yeah. Oh, hello, LAF. Oh, thank you, Anne. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, and it's interesting now as it is. Um, Hello, Lily. And though it's a live stream, after the video finishes, it'll be available in the live section of my channel, so you can view it at any time to follow along. Okay. I haven't quite finished because I am going to add some colour and see the difference that colour makes to this. I also know that I need to do something else before I erase this. I've got my pencil lines, which actually I'm quite happy with where my borders are. So I've gone back to this pen because the uni pins do dry a lot quicker. I really have wrecked the nib on this one, I tell you. And here there's a little bit there that just goes in there, but what I'm going to do there is I'm going to fill that in with black because it's a very small space and it looks a bit odd all on its own. In fact, I really am making a pig's ear of that, so we're going to fill that in like that. I'm adding deliberate little wobbles in my line because I'm not going to use a ruler. Ruler and ink pens and me? Oh no. Doesn't matter how I use it, the ink always smudges. Even with a ruler that's raised up from the page. Oh yeah. I can get ink to smudge. But I much prefer a hand-drawn line that has some imperfections in it. There we go. Because it just I don't know, it just feels right. I do draw things digitally, and there is something lovely about being able to easily edit and change things. But gosh, I much prefer the feel of pen on paper, and I'm going to try and do as much of that as I go forward. And this would be lovely to scan in without the pencil lines on shortly, and add colour digitally because I can play around with whether I like the background coloured, what things like that. But I still like to do it by hand. I'm not a Luddite, but you know, ew, kneadable eraser. And I'm just going to take this and it will erase the pencil, but it will also, as I said, pick up any loose pigment that hasn't settled into the paper and isn't fixed. And that means that with water, any loose pigment will have disappeared now. So it's not going to run. And I have left enough time, I have left enough time for the ink to dry. I'm not getting any smudging. What I thought was a smudge was just a bit of pencil that had smudged. And the pencil's all gone. The ink may look a little bit lighter because, again, that darkness that's on top just remains there. Now, what I've done is I've dug out some Inktense pencils today. I have got Deep Indigo, which is a lovely dark blue, Sienna Gold, which is it's a yellow, but it's a kind of orangey yellow. It's a golden yellow. And I've got Red Oxide, which is a rusty red. My favourite colours. And I think I'm going to use I'm going to stick to one colour. I'm going to stick to my Red Oxide. I'm not putting it on the paper. I'm going to use the tip of the pencil as if it was a pan of paint and just pick some colour up. And I'm just thinking about where I want to put this colour so that it's darkest. Inktense pencils are lovely because they're like watercolour when they're wet. When they dry, they're permanent on the page. But I can drop colour in just like I could with watercolour and it will spread and run, and then when it's dry, it's all set in place. And so I could come back and add layers, which I might do. So you can see there where I'm just adding some extra colour. The nice thing about adding colour this way is it will spread, it will create its own little texture, but I'm not working the paper anymore. So I can add colour quite easily as long as the paper's wet still. I like to use a water brush like this one. This is a Kuretake Zig one because I don't have to fuss with jars of water and the potential of me knocking it over because I can be terribly clumsy. I can hold on to something and it just drops out of my hand. And there's nothing wrong, it's just I forget it's there, I think, and just open my hand and go, "Oops." It happens often. Do you know how many mugs I killed last year and this year? And they've got a handle on, so how do they slip out of my hand? Who knows? I think my head might be elsewhere. There's a bit there. Now, picking up the pigment in this kind of way does not damage the point of the pencil. This is how I mostly use Inktense pencils, so I'm not too worried. I know you can buy them as blocks that you can use, um, like paints or like, the big stick forms so you can draw with them in large amounts, but I'm quite happy like this. You can get pan sets of them, but they don't have the colours I particularly like in them. They don't have this lovely red oxide, which I do like. I do have a bit of a thing about rust. So it's not really just this one rusty brown. When you see a decent bit of rust, there's black and blue and green and purple and magenta and all sorts of things in it. To look closely, though, it's the scientist in me. What oxidation number of iron oxide is this, or what particular hydro? And what kind of hydrate is it? Yeah, my brain goes to trying to analyze it, and, yeah, overanalysis. Something I try not to do in art, because if I start trying to overanalyze, I end up trying to change things and make a right mess of them. Adding colour is almost my bugbear, always. But if I stick to just one colour or just a couple of colours that I can mix, then I know I'm going to get something that looks okay. I do tend said this before and I'll say it again, these days I do tend towards the more earthy colours rather than the bright and vibrant ones. Don't know why, just age, I think, or, you know, it's not just the season, it's not just because it's autumn or fall here in the UK. I think it's just I like earth. Never would have said that, even just a few years, a couple of years ago, it would never have been. But there's something about it. If something's a bit dark, while it's still wet, I can pick it up or drop water in to push the colour away. But I am just adding more colour in places. I do think colour helps to bring this alive, even though I'm using one colour, because I'm trying to keep the shadows where they would lie, perhaps. Helps to bring the structure out somewhat, possibly. I mean, you know, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I can start to make sense of this. And then it goes from something that's very flat almost to something that feels almost alive. If I was going to do this quite simply, I could have used like graphite pencil and a tortillon Zentangle style, but I'm never happy with how that looks. To my eyes, it always looks just grimy, not grungy nice, but just grimy, like it needs a good scrub. It's not my taste, so I prefer to use colour. And today, oh, I do want to put that there. Tell you why. So if I get my sienna gold, this is where I'm going to add some of this golden yellow, just to bring a different colour out here, something a little bit different in some of these little seeds or beads or gems, whatever you want to call them. But I'm not going to town on the colour or anything. I'm keeping it very simple. Just that feeling that there's something precious in this, because 'cause they're all nestled in, being kept safe. Perhaps these could have been gems, but I can go back and add some of that golden colour just to lift those up, even though there's red there now it's dried. Feels like this one is one as well. This is such a lovely colour, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So I'm looking for anywhere else. Got that little bit there. It's not crucial that I fill these in now, but it's something I'd like to do so that I don't make a fox's paw of where I really want these to be. That definitely needs to be there. I think that one can be as well. And this one. Just scanning around. That one. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a little drop of water, which hopefully will just move a little bit of colour away there and create a little highlight. If it doesn't, it's fine. It is what it is. And some I'll leave them quite pale in colour in comparison because that variation is interesting as well. Down here, I could actually fill that in. So a little bit more up. And just dab that in and let it spread as it will. Might actually add some to this, and perhaps even to this coming out as if the main part of this design, whatever it is exuding this yellow gluey gunge or whatever. Oh, that could be as well. Let's have a look and see if we've got any spires or bits here that we can add some to. That would be quite nice. That one would as well. Just that little bit more. I've got a little bit of overspill there, so before it dries, I'm just going to wipe it off or spread it out. Okay, anywhere else? Yeah, I know I want to put this. Put some there and some in there. So I've got glowing going on as well. Looks like it could do with some. And here as well. I think I may go with some here so it looks like this is folding up and out. Oh, there's definitely a nice little rounded spot there. There would make sense as well. So we've got a dip there and a dip there, so let's do that. And as I did with that one that was just sort of like wafting around at the top, we'll do that. We'll have some other wafters filled in. As I've said, I'm just using different shades of the colour just to add interest more than anything else. It just doesn't mean anything. It adds that variation that adds interest. When colours are flat, that can look really good, but it's not my style. It just doesn't feel right. So I may get some yellows mixing with this lovely rusty red colour, and that's fine, because the mixed colours will actually make this quite coherent then. It'll feel like the colours belong together. But if it's just plain red oxide, that's fine as well. See, I've got some of the red going over that little bead seed thing there. Little drop of amber, honey sap. Oh, thank you, Anne. Hello, Judy. Good morning to you. It's an afternoon here. Oh, you are most welcome. Enjoy the rest of your day as well. It's lovely to have you here, and thank you for chatting. It's always nice when people do that. I forget to look at often, but because if I did all the time, it might take me forever to get there. So just to fill Judy in, what I've been doing is looking at smart. I've been doing while I've been poorly. I had tonsillitis and then oral thrush, and I COVID, tonsillitis, then oral thrush has left me quite low in energy and brain power and very tired. So I've been sleeping 12 to 14 hours a day, and it's functioning daily has been a problem, just getting things done. I think the washing in my machine is on its third wash. I really need to get it out because I'm not desperately running out of clothes, but I really want some of my fleecies out. Um, I have many fleeces, but when I'm running low on fleecies, well, it's a dire situation in this house, I can tell you. But I'm on the mend, and I'm actually being able to cook for myself, not just eat, easy food like sandwiches or whatever, or have takeaways delivered. So that's a good thing. And I've enjoyed it as well. Tidied my kitchen up, as in things away that I could that were taking up space on the work surface, and creating space so I could prepare and cook things. So that'll be my next job. Not sure what I'll do tonight. Don't know if I'll have a stir fry, whether I'll do dal. Might do some dal and rice, or I've got some naan breads here somewhere. They'd be quite nice. But so what I did was I drew a frame here, and I roughly put this started here. This is the dents. This is about thirds of the way in, a third of the way up. What it's supposed to be. It's shifted over and had a line that went through it to split the page up as a composition line. a composition guide, and then I used a pencil just to draw round it randomly and just keep this going. And once I was had enough pencil down, there were interesting shapes and overlays. I went back and used ink to pick out patterns or shapes and so on, and just see what happens. Very intuitive, not overthinking things, just letting it happen. And just seeing where it leads. This is one that I did yesterday and finished this morning. I added colour this morning in the last little bit of inking. And I used 2 colours there, this turquoise green and a sort of mossy yellow green. And I rather like that. The other one I did, or the other ones I've done, where's the other sketchbook? It's my other sketchbook. So that's the is that the first one? No, that was the first one I did. Then this one. Yeah, I've got lots of things. This will come up in my blog post, no doubt. I'll put something. I'll be when I get round to doing the blog post, which won't be today. But this one I did this morning. I haven't decided whether I want to add colour to the empty space or whether I want to add colour to the main elements. Sometimes I like it when you've just got the background colour in and the white and black and white stand out then. So, and I saw this on a YouTube channel just a couple of days ago and it intrigued me and I had a go and I'm really enjoying doing it because it takes you out of your comfort zone in a way, but it also kickstarts your creativity. It gives you a different way of doing things. And although this is typically me, because what lines I'm going to make with a pencil are generally going to be, if I'm not thinking about it, are going to be lines that feel nice to me to make. You know, I'd have to think really hard to force myself to make spiky lines or something that isn't my kind of thing. But it's always going to be influenced, even if you're not thinking about it, by your style or the way you like to create things. And you ink in then the shapes you see from the pencil that you've created. You just stop when you feel you've done enough. And you don't have to use all the lines. You're looking for what can I see in these lines? What am I drawn to? What's my attention drawn to? Not overthinking it and trying to say, well, that looks like a flower. I'll do that. It's just going with it. It's meant to be abstract. And certainly here, even though it looks a typical Angela kind of thing, there are shapes and lines here that I would never, ever have made if you gave me pen and paper and said, here, just draw, you know, just draw something, do you. But it gives me food for thought for future work. So I do like a bit of abstract, if you hadn't guessed. I think most of my work is quite abstract. Abstract and stylized, either or both. Sometimes a bit realistic, but not too often. Been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirts. Not my thing. I can do it, but I prefer to stylize, to take the essence of something. It's the scientist in me who does things like that, scientific illustration or, adding diagrams to your experiment, your lab reports to describe show other people what you saw, what was there, and just the bare essentials, not all the tiny, things that are superfluous to the communicating. For example, what flower it is. So you put down the identifying features more than the accuracy of every little line. You get the shapes correct. You try and get the shapes in proportion, say of the petals and the sepals, stamen and stigma and so on. But you don't actually use colour generally. It's tends to be done in black and white, and you use colours in the description. And I was always getting into trouble for being overly descriptive with colours, sort of saying, "Oh, blue and purple," or whatever. You'd have a description of what kind of blue it was from me and what kind of purple. I said, "Well, no, there's lots of different kinds of purple. Why would I want to say it's purple? It's a blue purple, not a red purple. There's a difference." Gosh. So my lecturers in university in particular just used to look at me and go, Okay. Yes, this is how I do it. We got there. We got an understanding. There was an understanding. They forgave me because I was usually pretty right in my description of colours. I also had quite a good colour memory, which is unusual for people to have good colour memories. My older sister was always amazed that if we ever, whenever we go shopping, and she might go, "I wonder if that'll go with my house." I'll go, "Yeah, it will." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's the same colour as whatever." And she go, I said, "That's a better match," or "That one's a better match." And she'd look at me and go, "We'll take some samples back." "Okay then. Okay, you were right," is always the answer. "Yeah, I know. Don't ask me how. I just, do it." Except I've got no sense of putting colours together myself, so but yeah, welcome to Angela's weird world, which is fine by me. So, oh, Ernst Haeckel, Hieronymus Bosch is really fascinating. Um, yeah, the red oxide is great, Lily. It's my favourite. That and to put this, the sienna gold and the indigo blue together just is for me, is a magic combination. And something like oh, what's iron green and iron blue work nicely with these as well. The German scientist's unusual design patterns. Oh, MC Escher, Judy. Is that who you were thinking about? I have got Sarah Renee Clark's colour box duo. I've got both boxes. Yeah, too many colours on each one. Just let me be monochrome or at least just two simple colours. There's something in simplicity in me. I either have a riot of colours when I'm doing things like my whimsical or creepy cute stuff, my more cartoony stuff. The other one, Ernst Haeckel? Yeah, Ernst Haeckel, isn't it? The one who drew the amazing illustrations of, ammonites and the foraminifera and plankton. Yeah, I love him. Yeah, I absolutely recommend them for both because I've drawn when I was doing A-level art. Ernst Haeckel was somebody I would use as a reference to draw things. I would look at how he constructed things with light and shadow, and because you learn art also by copying art. It doesn't mean that you pass it off as your own. It means that you're deconstructing how somebody else created their art and apply it yourself. So it's about looking and thinking about what's going on and doing that. But the patterns that there are in his work, the shapes and the motifs and the things you can pick out of it are absolutely amazing. And that has always interested me. Um, I used to use like a piece of card with a tiny little view, little square or square always, I think it was, cut out the middle, and we just move it around until I found a really interesting piece of pattern. And then that would be put in the sketchbook. And then that was used in different ways. And it's just great. Yeah, abstract is cool. It doesn't getting it, it's harder than it looks, but there are things you can do that make it together. I'm not likely to ever go down the mixed media route again. I've tried that in the past and it's not for me. It's A, it's too messy, and B, it gets overly complicated in layers and things like that. For somebody who draws, excuse me a moment, runny nose. I do apologise, but that had to be done. Somebody who draws quite intricate things, it's very noticeable that I tend to simplify things as well as much as I can, um, and break it down into simple steps. I've always done that's how my brain works. And I found that using these um, art composition guides, the way that you can compose a piece of art or whatever, This is based on that thirds instead of going diagonally as it's supposed to go kind of this way, but it went skew with. The third mark is there, so I just drew a line through the middle of it, but a curved line rather than straight line. This one was meant to be a kind of L shape. So you've got the main part of the L and there. So it's a bit skew with. The idea is that this leads your eye in a certain direction. And it also has forced me to leave empty space, which is something I do struggle with. That's something else that I did. This one, go back to my other sketchbook. Oh, this one has all creepy cute critters in here I've been drawing. Yeah, the reference thing. And here, look at those. Paint blobs. Just putting paint down and then seeing what comes up with it. That's another fun thing to do. It's just putting things down, colour down in random shapes and then just seeing what you can make of them. They're all done that way, believe it or not. And then there we are. I had to think of robots when I was waking up in the middle of the night last week or the week before a couple of times. So I just sat there with a pencil, listening to something and just scribbling them. These ones had no sort of guide like that, this one or this one. This one did actually. I did think of an L when I did that. Yeah, I didn't let the ink dry, did I, before I erased the pencil? This one, I'll put it this way round. You've got a letter C there and a C there. They sort of like almost swirl together, but they're not. There's a space left between them. And I actually find this interesting because it's got a lot more movement in it than this one. This one's growing, but there's something about this. If you're looking at this, your eyes would move around this a lot more. So it's a bit more exciting. It's something that I wouldn't have done without looking at these. And I said earlier on to who was here earlier, who's just gone, can't remember, Anne, that I'll start putting together a board or two on Pinterest and let you share with you the details of them so you can have a look. Yeah, that's the same kind of thing, Judy, the frame and things. You can buy viewfinders that photographers can use and artists use for landscapes and things. Um, Anything will do. We just used to use a piece of paper with something cut out the middle. You fold it in half and cut a rectangle out, sort of vaguely the proportions you want to draw. But it doesn't have to be exact, and it doesn't matter if the area you're working into, as long as it's roughly the same shape. It might get a bit skewed, but then you're making it yourself as well because it's your interpretation of something. Um, and when as a scientist, looking down microscopes and having to draw what you see there, you've naturally got a circular frame around it. So it frames it for you. And if you use a higher magnification, you can zoom in on a smaller part of it. So that idea of framing just takes away that how much of it do I draw? And it's not a cheat, it's a tool. People say, oh, this is a cheat. No, it's not. It's a tool. It helps you isolate what you want to focus on because otherwise, with me, I'd want to draw everything. This is a big issue I have with landscapes. I have to get far enough away from what I want to draw so I can't see the leaves on the trees. Otherwise, I'll try and draw every leaf, every bit. Um, having said that, I can't remember the name of the artist, a female artist. And had a look at her work when I was either doing A level or afterwards, it suggested. And she would sit somewhere, say in the woods, and she'd have a book in front of her, sketchbook in front of her, and she would keep her eyes on one point, would always go back to that one point and draw what she could see there. And without moving her head, she'd then start from the center and work her way out. And eventually she got to the edge of the paper. And then she'd start drawing back in, going as far as her peripheral vision could see. And you could see the elements of everything, but it created this amazing sort of like layered drawing of a different kind. And I tried that and it was very frustrating because I could see a lot more peripheral vision than I think she could. I think perhaps you have to come to a point where you go, yeah, that's enough, and I couldn't do that. But I need some blinkers to stop me going so far back. and I didn't move my eyes, and that was fun to do and interesting, and a different way of working. And then there was what's his name? There was an artist, his surname began with H. Howard Hodgkin or Hodgkin. Or something like Hodgkin, Hodgin, Hodgkin, who would take years and years and years to work on a painting because he kept going back to it and painting his memory of it. So it would change and become more abstract and more ghostly over time as the visual references fade in your memory and it became more about feelings and memories. And he would actually paint over the frame of the canvas. So the canvas would be in an ornate frame, but he'd actually paint over the frame, showing how I think how it appears to me is how this spills over into your life. Those memories affect so many people around you. You just can't keep it contained in one space. Yeah, fractals are fun. Like people have often asked me, Judy, if I'd publish my journals or my sketchbooks, and I couldn't do it easily because a lot of them are a lot of my work is out of it. But something like this one, you know, or adding to it would be interesting, I suppose, or to start a sketchbook that is specifically for that and to have, you know, like somewhere in these, I've put words there. Well, some of them are very personal, but some of them are really useful. In my other sketchbook, the one where you saw the sea shapes and things, I've made notes of what I've done here, what the idea is behind it. I've got to remember to find the name of the person's YouTube channel that I watched where this came up. I've heard of it before, but it sort of prompted me to give this another go. And you know, to reference that so that people can go and see where I started from with this as well. And, you know, always give credit to where the inspiration comes from. It's like a lot of the work I showed at the beginning of the video is inspired by Rebecca Blake. No, Rebecca Blair. My head is thinking William Blake, but my mouth wanted to say her name, so Blake. There you are. And always mention people. If I know their name, I'll always mention them. If I don't know their name, it's really hard to. But we get inspiration from so many places, both, you know, from the past, because my love of pattern and texture goes all the way, you know, stretches all the way back to prehistoric pottery and rock art and, you know, things like that, because it's just fascinating. And to see the patterns and shapes, you know, the shapes and motifs that are used in prehistoric rock art and pottery, same as we use today, just executed in a different way, perhaps with a little bit more finesse with the tools and the technology we have. But things like the spiral are kind of like a universal symbol to every culture. It's found in every culture, as is the circle and you know, all the basic shapes and motifs and forms. They're all there. Um, have you looked at Islamic patterns, Judy? Hello, Gail. Thank you. Kisses to you as well. Judy, I did say a little while ago that I'm going to start sessions on Zoom, I think, because I could use Teams, but Teams does my head in more than Zoom does, for people to come and sit and work, you know, to like a class, if you like, or a, you know, tutorial, you know, you come and draw with me. And that's one way of doing things. It's picking the time for people because there's people all over the place. I've had good mornings, good nights, good evenings, and I'm thinking, well, it's only late afternoon here because everybody's scattered across the world. Um, but I'm more than happy to do things like that. There may be a small cost that goes with it because you know Zoom costs, um, but I'd love to do things like that because there'd be more natural. Yes, henna patterns as well. You find that a lot in mandalas, but Islamic tile patterns, sort of like any kind of tile around the world. from medieval tiles forward, there are so many beautiful patterns in them because they, if you like, in Zentangle terms, they're fragments, aren't they? Because you can put them together in repeating patterns, or you can use a selection of them and tile them in patterns or at random. But a lot of them have these geometric patterns on them. Islamic patterns are very geometric, because I know that in Islamic art, they don't paint people ever, because I think part of Islam is that people are in God's reflection and it's perfect and you can't replicate it. They do use things from nature like flowers and so on, but they're very stylized from what I remember. But the geometric patterns are amazing and they are interwoven, interlinked. They're kind of Celtic, but not Celtic, if that makes sense. They have these layering of patterns and so on. And I'm pretty good with the ruler and tractor, but I can't get my head around those. I find Celtic knotwork awkward as well. I just haven't found a construction method that my brain connects with. But henna patterns work as well beautifully. Um, I've got a couple of books here. One is called From Pattern to Stitch or From Texture to Stitch, and that's using patterns and textures in nature, or not just nature, but from rust and all rocks and all sorts of things, and using that to create patterns in stitch. So for to add stitch work to your drawn pieces like this, or to textile work, to create textile work, or whatever it may be. And what's the other one I was thinking of? Oh, my head's gone now. I've got one that is just a book full of texture, photographic textures from nature to rust to all sorts of things. If I remember, I'll dig it out. I'm sure it's down surfaces and textures. There we are. That's what it's called. It's on my bookshelf here. I can't see who it's by, mind. Yeah, surfaces and textures. Oh, I didn't think it was that one. But yeah, surface and textures. So and there is a web-based app called Repper, and you can upload your artwork to it, and you can create repeating patterns there by choosing sections like viewfinders, and you can zoom in, zoom out. You can choose how big you want the tiles to be. What they've got various kinds of patterns to tessellate, and that's really fun as well. Um, don't use it much, but I do have a hankering to use things like this to create tiles that can then be used to create colouring pages and to do things like that, because it's easy enough to do. I can export the tiles into Clip Studio Paint and add them as an image in a tiling. That's complex, but I know how to do it. It's easy enough when you know how. And that would be fun to do with this, with all these interesting shapes in here to see what will come out. But I tell you, I can get lost in it. One drawing, I've been known to collect about 30, 40 patterns in next to no time, all different. It's bonkers. But Repper, Repper. Yeah. It's people ads sewing. I've done that in the past. Um, I'll have to find some pictures to try and show you, or to drop somewhere, of the textile work I did for my A level and beyond. Um, one of my pieces won the textile section of a local art competition. Um, and it was based on cup and ring marks in prehistoric work, but it was on black felt. And I used all these beautiful silks that were quite brightly coloured against it, and beautiful burgundies and greens and blues and purples, almost like rust, colours you get when you look at rust. And I used wire that was stitched down, as well as stitches and beads and various other embellishments I made myself. I made my own style of sort of sequins, if you like, so I could cut things out that were the shape and size I wanted and layer them up, and they were lifted up by beads and all sorts of things and embellished on the top to hold them. And I love doing that, but I haven't done it for such a long time, and it's sort of like it was a phase I needed to go through. And I do see what people do with mixed media and stitching. It's really rather good these days. And the junk journalists who use a lot of things like that as well. It's nice to see. Oh, kaleidoscopes are fantastic. Love kaleidoscopes. I used to as a when I was teaching light and reflection and mirrors and how they work, it was always one of the things we used to do was to make a kaleidoscope, and it's it's just amazing to see kids go, "Wow, wow," because they may not never have seen a kaleidoscope or used one before, and they do this, and they've made it themselves, and they can draw their pictures out, and they can change it and get rude things because they always go looking for the rude, but they were always amazed with how that worked and how simple it was. Just 3 mirrors taped together in a triangle, and you put on yeah, it works. It's no problem. Oh, unicorns are fantastic. We all have a unicorn within us. I think we're all said it earlier in the video that we're all human, and that means we're creative. We may not believe we are, but everybody is. The secret is finding out how creativity works for you. And it's amazing to see how many different ways people show their creativity. And you can't like it. It may not always be to your personal taste, but these people are expressing themselves in one way or another. And it's quite amazing that variety. It's as various as humans are. Yes, there are themes. People work within certain kinds of genres or in certain kinds of ways. So there's going to be some commonality, but you can see the individuality even then. And you can see people who are still perhaps not as confident to stretch themselves from the people they are learning from in some ways. And I always want to see people fly from the nest and do things that are theirs. This is a great way of discovering that this is a style of mine, and I recognize this as a style in the same way that things like let me go over here. Things like this, influenced by Rebecca Blair, not quite my style yet, but things like this reminds me of medieval patterns. This isn't finished yet. I haven't decided how I'm going to put pattern in it. But things like this are just things that I just exploring here and seeing what happens. There's one that hasn't got any colour or anything else. It's just the basic grid. I don't know what I'm going to do with that one. This one worked in the end. Made a right mess in these, so I decided to fill them in with black. And I may put a small golden triangle in each one just to break that back up a little bit. And then these, much bigger scale, but they're all based on the same grid, same basic grid. What do they call it in Zentangle? Reticular. The same basic grid with the crosses, but each one looks different. I've used the same colours. This, oh gosh, they're pro markers. So I think it's burnt sienna. I think this is moss green, and this one is yellow ochre, I think. And I wish I'd used colours that had more contrast or hadn't gone added so much darkness in places so everything and you can't see the colour properly. But this is another way I like to work. And these two in my head I'm working out don't really belong together unless I'm working in a very big drawing and there's something in my head where it all clicks. And I'll work, it does happen. But it's all exploring, experimenting, and nothing stays the same forever with you. Being human is all being creative, but it's also about growing and developing. And as you experience your own art and experience life and you experience new sources of inspiration, whether it's from other people's work or from what you've observed in nature or elsewhere, or what you've seen in a dream, or you've just I don't know, daydreaming, watching television or listening to music, and suddenly an idea pops into your head that you've not seen anywhere else and you go with it. Even if you don't execute it the way you think you ought to, you're still being creative and it leads you in a different path. This is a way of leading me in a different path, in a way. It's very typically Angela. Because I don't draw perfectly straight lines ever. But there are some corners in here. It might be a bit rounded, but there are some corners, and there are some sharp points, for goodness sakes. But at the same time, there are many shapes in here, many ways lines have gone because they were made by a combination of basically random lines and shapes scribbled with a pencil on here. And those pencil lines crossed over one another. They created grid lines. And then once the pencil was down, the next job was to just softly focus eyes so that you can see shapes and forms or lines that appealed and to ink those in, whatever you saw. And a lot of the pencil lines were completely ignored. Some were altered a little bit because they might have crossed over in a way that I wouldn't have liked, and that's where my thinking mind came in. I was trying not to use my thinking mind too much, but it's inevitable. But for putting pencil lines down, I didn't think about that. In fact, I barely looked at the page while I was doing that. I had put down the focal point, which actually was over here, but it grew over this way. And the basic shape of the line I wanted to go through, but that's all I started with. And it just grew from there and became what it is here and now. And, uh, and it's the same case with the others. No intention of what I'm going to do or make. I am thinking the next time I might start with a focal point in mind, a flower or a seed pod or a little bit of them, and then just draw all of these random lines around them in one of these instruction forms, whatever they may be, and just see where that takes me, rather than using all the usual kinds of, mookas and, the usual kinds of things that can often pop out with me. Breaks me of that habit, I suppose, or gets me thinking in a different way as well. So I often do feel I can get very stuck in a mode. Um, so I like to experiment and think outside. I think with this, it feels so nice to do this. Um, it's not too much of a challenge, if at all. There's no pressure on me to create an amazing masterpiece, and yet this has worked out quite nicely. I mean, this paper isn't the best for watercolouring on. I'm using Inktense pencils, but it's worked out much nicer than I thought it would, given the state of the pencil. I'm going to call it a scribble. Wasn't really scribbled, doodled, random lines, automatic lines, automatic drawing, not thinking about what you're doing and just letting your hand put the shapes and forms down as it will, and just trusting that process and just not thinking about how your hand's moving or what shapes it's making, just let it do it. Easier said than done, perhaps, but it's worked quite nicely, really. Just a couple more bits to go. Want a bit more there. Now I'm just picking the colour up from the tip of the pencil. I've said this before in this video. It doesn't harm the tip at all. It might be a bit crumblier if you're wanting to colour with it. It might put a bit down a bit more colour than you wanted, especially if it's not left to dry thoroughly before you use it in the more traditional way. But I hardly ever use Inktense pencils in the traditional kind of way. What I am going to do is I'm going to take some of this sienna gold, and there are places where I've got a lighter colour where I can mix this with the iron oxide just to bring a little bit of difference in, particularly where the colour's lighter, just to bring some more interest in, I think. There won't be many places, but I think there'll be enough that will add some nice interest here. Don't know what you think about that as an idea, but I'm going with it. It's amazing if you use just two colours how many other colours you can make, and they will always, always look wonderful together because all the colours that you create are made up of the same 2 colours. That's something I'm learning as well. As lovely as the colour boxes from Sarah Renee Clark are, um, sometimes it's the simplest things work, and I do like a very simple approach to adding colour and adding interest, unless I'm adding texture and pattern. This here could really do with some yellow here. Said this earlier as well, Inktense pencils dry permanently. Once they're dry, you can't shift the colour unless you haven't dissolved it all. This is some that's still there that's hasn't been wetted. So going over this means that the iron oxide will stay where it is. So essentially, I'm just glazing the colour, just applying this colour over the top just to change the tone of some of these, just to add that little bit of extra interest perhaps here, a bit of surprise, a bit of lightness perhaps. So I'm looking where these areas are lightest and just putting that golden colour down in those lighter areas where I can. If it spills over into other areas, I'm not going to worry about it because it's all going to work together anyway. And who says it's not meant to be there? I'm not. This goes where it goes. And again, it might be those unexpected overspills of colour that create something unexpected. And you think, gosh, I need to remember how to do that. And of course, you never do, unless you write it down straight away, which is why I'm starting to keep notes, as I used to in sketchbooks when I was doing my A levels and so on. Always useful. What do you like about this? What have you learned? How did you do it? What colours did you use? What medium did you use? Because going back, you may not remember. And show how you mix what happens when you mix those colours. So if you like those colours, you can always go back and mix them again. This is a bit insipid, so I'm just adding a bit more orange there just to bring that one out. Orange sienna gold rather. And I'm just looking to see where let's just add there's quite a lot of light coloured ones here, isn't there? So let's just add some around here just to help bring some richness into these colours perhaps. That one there will be the last one. And this one down here could do with just that little bit more, as could that and this one here. But that one, that stem could really do with some of this, some red oxide. Just going back where I've missed with the red oxide, there's some little gaps here and there, so I'm just going to go and fill them in. Missed out a bit of ink there, so I'm going to fill it in with that. And there we are. That's my abstract arty piece done from automatic drawing, intuitive art, not overthinking things, just seeing where it goes. So, okay, I'm just going to read through what you've said, Judy. I understand what you're saying about arting in an expanded sense. I really do. And it's everybody looks at things differently. I have I've had to learn how to filter things out because I see too much, if that makes sense. I see everything. So when I've tried doing landscapes, I end up with froth. Like trees, there's just a frothy trees because I'm trying to draw every leaf in I can see, which is ridiculous, and I can't filter that out. But by drawing in a very stylized style, by working from photographs or other reference sources, not copying them, but just using them for inspiration, it's easier for me to filter out stuff, just as I did in science. So the world itself is overwhelming, but individual little bits are fascinating. And if I go to, say, a cathedral with Sketchbook, I haven't done this for years, but I never draw the cathedral itself. I can take a photograph of that if I want. But my sketchbook will record sculptural patterns over arches and things like that. Individual patterns that you might find on the tombs inside or in the chapels and the floor in tiles. The way that the arches of the structure join together, the shapes of them, anything that's coloured and the patterns that are used, these will come together, but they come together like a collage of drawing, where I don't put them as individual drawings on the page. I actually slot them together, so it creates almost like a memory drawing for me, because I'll remember where that was and what I saw and what I liked, and that drawing's enough. And sometimes you get imaginary lines will appear to connect things sometimes, and swirls will come off and spirals and things because it seems the right thing to do. Mm. S I like and it's something I haven't done for a while because normally I don't go to places on my own very often these days. Lost my confidence, quite a long while ago, and if I'm with a friend, I feel guilty if I sit there and draw for ages or just want to spend hours there and they feel obliged to be with me, even though I say, "Go and do something, come and find me when you're finished. I'm not going anywhere than here, you know, you might find me in the tea room if there's a tea room." Um, that's if we're in that kind of place where there is, things to look at. But I like working on A5 size, but it intrigues me now. How can I do this on a bigger size? Shall I try A4 at some point? I'm not sure. But I know one of my jobs to do is to start putting together a couple of Pinterest boards, um, related to videos like this, where I can I don't know if you can share, should be able to share videos or, the videos I've watched. I can do that here. So you can go and watch these things and any inspiration I find, artwork, and pop things in there or references like the compositions, composition guides, suggestions, how to compose a drawing. Because I struggle with wanting to fill every bit of space, got to fill that. I can leave white space, but sometimes it's nice to start with the intent of leaving white space and having some kind of shape you want delineated. I like a frame. This would look odd to me on its own, but with a frame, it looks like it's meant to be there. And I like how it grows outside the frame, just as this one does. There's just something really nice about that growth. Um, it adds that kind of movement to it, that life to it. This one as well is it's got a lot of movement, but it hangs outside the frame. I had to make the frame here smaller. It was actually too close to the edge of everything, so I shrunk it in so these have went over the outside, but it just works. I really like this. This is so it's both characteristic and so uncharacteristic of me. I never would have thought of putting two shapes like this together if I hadn't seen this about compositions. And I saw that from a mixed media artist who was talking about how to compose your art, your abstract art or your mixed media art by using a composition form. And he used a big L shape cut out a card to put on his page and work out where he was going to put the main features, things that would draw your eyes. And I thought, never thought about that before. Nobody's ever mentioned this to me before. And I will remember to link that video along with the one about abstract work art. To be my job now when I disappear from years to go and find those videos and save them. In fact, I might have saved them already, and I'll share them when in a post I'll do about this, hopefully. I do apologize about my wobbly table every time I move. One day, that my room downstairs is going to be empty, and I've got a sturdier table down there, and it might be nice to use that room. I say empty because I've got chair and a stool in there that I'm waiting for a friend to pick up. I bought a day bed earlier this year, and it's in my living room, And I live in an old miner's house, stone-built house, built in the late 1880s. And so the rooms are quite small. There's 2 downstairs rooms and a pokey little kitchen added on. And I've kept them as 2 rooms over the years. A lot of people have had them knocked into one, which is quite nice and light and airy, to be honest. But I quite like having the different feel of the rooms and different purpose for them. But the back room has been stuffed with stuff for ages with this. And, I'm looking forward to being able to get things out the way so I can start sorting stuff out and making that space for me down there, which is a bigger table, has more space on it, and clearing out bookshelves of stuff that I no longer need, and having space to store art materials close by rather than filling my bedroom up as I am at the moment. My bedroom's huge, by the way. That's because 2 bedrooms at the front of the house were knocked into one. And I love it. It's enough space for an office and everything up here. But I've got a lovely chair downstairs that I can bring upstairs, so I've got space to sit and read, and in the summer to watch the world go by. I do like working up here, so but I can always work on a drawing board on my lap. I'm wittering, so too much input, any kind is overwhelming duty for me. It can be noise, it can be people talking at once, lights, um, just everything together. So crowds are overwhelming, busy shopping places are overwhelming. The world is overwhelming a lot of time. Nature isn't, as long as there's not loads of people there. I'm fine with just small group of people who I get on well with, who are a lot like me in many ways. You don't put my niece and my older sister together unless you want a very strange, bizarre, and raucous time. My older sister and I say often, and actually a good friend of mine called Liz, we say we really ought to record our conversations as a podcast because people would not believe the rubbish we talk, the stuff we talk about, and the randomness of it. And but we're as bad as each other. It's just, I don't know whether it's genetics partly, but you just you then go, hang on, we were talking about something. What were we talking about? And same with Liz, on day jollies, it'd be somebody be driving and the other one would go, "Oh, look at that, it's over there. Oh, I didn't never knew there was a cemetery. Ah, it's a cemetery I'd like to go." Honestly, I like cemeteries for social history, not the morbid. Not interested in morbid. I just find it social commentary through, rituals of, what you do with somebody once they've passed away and the messages you send to people. But I'm wittering. I am going to love and leave you all now. I'm desperate for a cup of tea, but before I do that, I need to find these videos and make a note of them somewhere before I forget. It's been lovely having you with me, and I'm so glad that you've enjoyed this, and I do hope you'll give it a go. Um, it's really is fun, and don't put any kind of pressure on yourself to create something that you have in your mind because it won't work for this. This is something you have no control about other than once you've got the pencil lines down, you can then decide what shapes pop out to you and how they go together. Mine all have joined together because I find it hard to leave white space. And also there wasn't really that kind of space within them. Have I got one here that did have space within them? Yeah, I don't know. Let me have a look. Just to finish this off, I do have issues saying goodbye, by the way, if you hadn't noticed. So something like this, there's quite large sections in this one, completely different. Huh? Constructed in the same way, but just completely different. Not quite. I didn't use a construction, line as it were, or shape. This one, there's a nice large area in it, but lots of smaller areas coming off. All of these shapes are wiggly lines. These things that I wouldn't have drawn. I would never have thought this would have turned out the way it was. But yeah, paint hadn't dried. And this one as well. There are large areas within it, not empty space, but larger areas. This one, no, not that one, this one, ended up with lots of strange shaped little things all joined together. But it does feel very organic. And it does feel like some strange creature that's just been discovered somewhere on some planet, somehow, somewhen. What it lives, how it lives, who knows? Perhaps it's just a mineral. I don't know. But enjoy the rest of your day. Have a go at this. And I look forward to seeing you again soon because as I'm getting better, I'll be able to do more of this. So thank you for bearing with me. And and it is lovely to be back helping and sharing ideas, sharing methods, and inspiring you as you tell me. So don't forget, I love to see what people do as well. And the best place to find me is most probably either Facebook or Instagram to share. I don't do Twitter, and I do have a blog, but you can't really share artwork through the blog. But if you want my email address, just let me know, and I can do that if you prefer to do it, privately. You can do it through Messenger and things like that if you wish. I'm not very good at remembering to look for messages though that aren't from friends, so you have to friend me. How about that? So take care, and we'll see how things go. Um, and I shall see you again soon. Bye for now. Bye.